So at this time, we're gonna open up the public forum. The topics listed on the agenda are general comments related to the work of the committee. Please understand the committee will not take any action on comments or unrelated to the current agenda due to requirements of the open meetings law, but may do so at a future meeting. So Elisa, you got it open then?
There's no one from the public present.
Okay. You want to give it a minute?
Are we expecting people from the public?
We have one attendee. And I don't see him requesting to speak, so we can move on, I would assume.
Move on. Okay, we'll close the public forum portion and move on to agenda item number 1. First, I'll bring the meeting to order, and then we'll move on to agenda meeting item number 1, approval of the June 9th, 2021 minutes. Everybody had a chance to read those minutes, and is there any additions, deletions, or amendments?
I'll move to approve them.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it, and the meeting minutes are approved. Next item is the Lux Air Report. Steve, you on?
Yes, I am. So let's see. We're still working on getting the derecho replacement hangars built. Just a lot of delays trying to get contractors out there. But we do have the walls and the roof done. So we're just waiting on getting the floor and the doors completed. So I know we haven't talked about it in a while, but we are still waiting on the airport facilities directory to be updated with all of the new runway information. I recently noticed that some of the changes, or one change, was made. And so I reached out to the DOT to try and figure out when the rest of those updates are going to be coming. Don't really have any idea on when that's going to be. The correct updates were all submitted at the same time, which was about a year ago now. So we're just still waiting on the FAA to go through their process, I suppose. But in the meantime, there is a NOTAM that's out saying what the correct runway dimensions are and that it's all asphalt. We recently had a pothole that one of our flight instructors noticed and reported to us, and we've already gotten that patched. And the runway lights, we're still waiting on those getting fixed. Last I had heard, they were still waiting on parts. A few other updates is we have had some larger aircraft coming in. A few King Airs, one of which was one of the guys out in the Medco area, Quincy Recycling. They've started flying in again, so that's good to hear. And that is about all I have.
Anybody have any questions for Steve or comments?
Steve, I'm just curious, where was the pothole? It wasn't in the new paving, was it?
It was. It didn't look like it was from any like impact. Just seemed like there might have been something in the mix. And so, yeah, it just something when it was the paving was put down. Didn't set quite right, but we've gotten that area all patched up, so should be good.
We're not seeing any evidence of that anywhere else, are we?
There were Yeah, there was some really tiny stuff that wasn't even on the main, that wasn't on the runway. It was over by the turnarounds, but small enough that it doesn't affect anything. Like quarter size stuff. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Just a funny side comment about this, and this goes to show you that LL Pelling doesn't do a whole lot of airport runways. Right after they got done, they left an orange cone in the middle of the runway. I have never seen that in my entire life. So we took off and we had to go around the cone to leave the area. It was something, but I found it amusing. It was no big deal, but it was kind of funny. Orange cone right in the middle of the runway.
Huh.
Yeah,
This is
Okay,
John.
go ahead.
Go ahead. I would just, the question, since we didn't meet last month, was the fly-in successful? I was out of town, but I think the weather was kind of iffy, was it not?
Yeah, the weather was nice, other than there were some really low ceilings. So we didn't have very many people fly in to the fly-in, but we did have quite a bit of the public come out, and the flight school was given a bunch of rides. And I know that we had pretty decent turnout for, the first fly-in coming back from the pandemic.
Okay, great.
I think there were 6 aircraft that were given rides. Steve, is that correct?
Somewhere
Approximately.
around there. Yep. And they
So-
were going pretty much nonstop for like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, I flew for 6 for that
Oh.
thing. So
Yeah.
So that's, you figure you can do about 4 trips in an hour. So, I mean, it was as busy it's been in past years, if not a little bit busier. And with iffy weather, I was really surprised by the turnout. I thought it was excellent.
Cool.
Great.
Okay, nothing else for Steve. We'll move on. Third item, the chairman's report. I really have nothing to report, so we'll skip that. Items for discussion. Instrument approach update. Tom, is that you or Mike?
I'm gonna take that one. So Hughes has billed us for 30% of the instrument approach. They were supposed to come out August 5th and start doing the runway and ground obstacle data. I don't know if it was good enough weather then to do that, but they are starting the work to actually get that produced. So
Yes, they did come out, and they did the surveying both on and off the airport.
Was that just like obstacle survey stuff? That wasn't anything, they weren't like flying around doing anything like that?
They had a drone that they were using to survey around the airport, and then for all the offsite stuff, my understanding is they were just going and making sure that all the obstacles that the FAA thought were there, and they were also looking around for anything that wasn't in the FAA database.
Okay.
And Mike reached out to them and asked them to provide us a report. So we're hoping to get a regular report from them. I don't know if it'll be at every meeting, but something to provide an update on what's going on in the contract.
yeah, so as they bill us, they're supposed to send us a report with it that we can provide both to this committee and to city council.
Did they give you an estimate on a time frame for this? I mean, I maybe we've talked about it. I don't remember.
The original proposal had timelines in it.
Okay.
I think it was about a year by the time you factor in the FAA, but of course you never know how long they're going to take.
Correct.
Is that a year to publish, Craig? Do you remember?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's correct. From start to finish, about a year, but the FAA, it could be longer or shorter.
I'm gonna guess it's not gonna be shorter. but we can hope.
Okay, anything else? Moving on, Aircom Park sanitary sewer update. That's you again, Mike.
Yep. So we just received bids yesterday for the sanitary sewer extension. So that basically is from Medco Drive along the fence line there, the Jorgensen property south of Medco. And then it goes under our newly improved airport. So we put casing pipes in at the time so that we don't have to tear out our new runway. With that, the low bid was Rachi Construction. There is a late start date of 9/27 with 40 working days. And then there's $300 per day in liquidated damages. And then there's a limit of 7 calendar days of closing the runway down, which is if they go over those 7 calendar days, there's $4,000 per day in liquidated damages. There's also the carrot of if they get done prior to those 7 days of closing the airport down, they actually get an incentive of $4,000 per day. There's an agreement with both the flight school and with Lux Air that they get paid a portion of that $4,000 per day from the city or the contractor, depending on where we're at with that closure. So this way, while the airport's closed, those entities that are directly affected are being reimbursed for that. And that all went through city council.
I was going to ask for my share as a tenant at the airport, but I don't want to pay my share of the bonus. So I'll just let that go.
Mike, do you know if what kind of lead time we're gonna get for when the runway is gonna need to be closed?
Yeah, I mean, so that we just got the bids yesterday, so it still has to have a public hearing. The contracts will have to be signed, bonds will have to be obtained, so we got some time before we know. And then they typically start at the low end of the sewer, which would be far enough to the west. And then once they get so close, we have it marked on the plans when we'll have to do the NOTAM to close the runway down so that they can put the pipe through the casings. And that's when that limitation will be in effect, so.
All right, I guess just as soon as you know, if you could let us know so I could get it out to the tenants on the airport, that
Yep,
would be
and then-
great.
And then Jane was gonna go ahead and do some notifications to FAA and stuff regarding the project as well.
Mike, will we see any action on that next week's council meetings?
You will have a public hearing and an award on council.
I had just kind of a sidebar somewhat related to the Aircom Park. I don't know how many are aware that also included in the Aircom in the area is the preliminary plat for Aircom. I believe it's called Aircom Park, which is the Genesis development just east of the airport. The group has submitted a preliminary plat. That preliminary plat's under review right now. And I believe it went through Planning Commission last night. And it'll also be forwarded to City Council. So you'll start seeing some work done out east of the airport relative to an industrial park. They received some funding similar to the funding that we received to complete some sewer work out there. So hopefully we'll start seeing some work done in that area on the private development side. In addition, Medco Holdings has sold the property just west of the airport. 2 buildings are proposed to go up on the corner of what would be Airport Road and, oh gosh, is it Enterprise Drive or Enterprise Drive, right, Mike?
Mhm.
And so Enterprise Drive is going to be extended to Airport Road. And then as a part of that project, there's going to be an asphalt overlay completed for Airport Road all the way out to what would be the road within Aircom Park preliminary plat. So hopefully we'll be able to see hard surfaced asphalt road extending to the entrance of the airport as a part of the development out there, as well as the extension of Enterprise Drive to Airport Road. Does that make sense to you guys? So there'll be a lot of work. That'll connect the business park directly to the airport road, which I think would be a benefit to folks that, you know, may want to have direct access to the airport from the Enterprise Center or Marion Commons Park.
Is Enterprise the one that comes through Culver? Is that where that is?
No,
It's
this
going
is
in.
it would come from so it directly connects MEC to Airport Road. Alicia, can you allow me to share my screen?
Should be able to now.
Okay, sorry. 1 second. I'll try not to labor this issue here.
Tom, we've already seen that information that you were just referring to regarding Enterprise Drive at council a couple of meetings ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Medco Holdings is developing as a part of their final plat. This is, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
So essentially there's a plat that shows this area being final platted. And so as a part of that, they have to extend the public improvements to Marion Airport Road. So that'll start to be constructed. And then what will happen is, what we did is we did a side contract with Medco to actually complete an overlay from the highway all the way around to complete this intersection here, which is the entrance to what would be Aircom Park preliminary plat, which will really covers a great deal of this ground down in here. So it would extend the road that's currently gravel to city standards, hard surface or concrete, and then create a loop drive, and this area would become industrial development. We're still working through, or Genesis is still working through what exactly gets completed and when. The way the USDA funding works is it's a loan. And so they only got half the funding they requested, so they're trying to talk through a phasing plan with that group. The city council will see the preliminary plat at the next meeting. So there'll be a lot of work out here. That's why I'm saying, you know, from the perspective of a direct access, you know, if you have a business out here, you don't have to get onto the highway necessarily. You'll be able to work over to the airport on internal roads, and there will no longer be a gravel road to access until you get to the airport, of course. But we're working on that. Does that make sense?
It would be nice
Any
if they had
questions?
enough gravel, or if they had enough asphalt left over in the truck to do that entryway into the airport. Then it'd be almost done.
Yeah.
No chance, sorry.
Yeah, they can just spill some of that asphalt over onto that and call it good, right?
Right. We'll see. Sparkle, work your magic.
Now, Tom, is any of this development going to have any impact on the future lengthening of the runway?
No. No.
Does the work on the east side affect our potential east-west runway?
Say that again.
Does any of the work going on the east side of the airport affect our east-west potential runway?
No.
Okay, Anybody got anything else about aircom? Okay, we'll move on to the minimum operating standards discussion. I imagine that's Jerry.
Yes, sir. Before we talk a little bit about minimum standards, I'd kind of like to take the opportunity to run through a couple other items with the committee, since you're all gathered together in terms of developing a report and recommendations that will ultimately be submitted to the city, just to let you get some idea as to what I've been working on. I do want to address the issue of, in a little more detail, the concept of airport ownership and governance, and to how the decision-making process works, and within the context of the airport master plan that was previously done. I did take it in the opportunity to update the aviation forecast. I thought that was somewhat appropriate given the construction pre-pandemic era, the derecho, and a couple other events that have affected the number of based aircraft as well as aircraft operations. Really, and wanted to somewhat get your comments, if you want to make them, with regards to this forecast. Pre-pandemic, and we'll refer to it as that, you had approximately 49 aircraft based there at the airport. Today in 2021, that number's dropped down to 23. Forecasting going forward, I'm looking at a number by 2040 of upwards of 50 based aircraft. Majority of those being approach category A airplanes with approach speeds under 91 knots. That's probably fairly consistent, especially with the type of aircraft that are currently based there. But in years ahead, seeing additional aircraft with an approach speed under 121 knots, wingspans under 79 feet, and upwards then over the next 20 years of about 50 or so based aircraft. That number seems to be consistent with the recent Iowa DOT State Aviation Systems Plan forecast that just came out this year, as well as the FAA forecast numbers for the Marion Airport. But a little bit more important than that is the aircraft operational mix, because I'm going to use these numbers based on the number of local and itinerant operations by aircraft design group, that being approach speed, wingspan, to calculate transportation. Oh, there you go. Hey, thanks. Benefits. Here again, I think prior to 3 major events, there are approximately 12,000 total annual aircraft operations. Majority of those, again, by A-1 airplanes, and a number by approach category B2 airplanes. A small King Air obviously fits into a B2 category. A small jet would be a B2 airplane as well, or fit into that category. Over the time then, local operations are basically a touch and go itinerants that are move and operate outside site of the airport generally. So you can see our forecast numbers there from pre-pandemic up to 2040. So with those numbers, then I started to calculate the airport benefits, ultimately leading to what hopefully will be a benefit cost analysis, a preliminary BCA, So based on the utilization of the Eastern Iowa Airport and current itinerant operations, and I've used approximately 30-some% of the total itinerants that would be by visitors, the others by local aircraft owners. But in 2021, I would anticipate the transportation benefit to total for a given year of $131,000. So Tom, if you want to scroll away, oh, if you're the, yeah, keep on going, we'll get to that table. We'll skip all the stuff in between for this meeting. Right, there you go. So pre-pandemic, based on the transportation benefit and the methodology that was used, and if you want to scroll up just a bit, oh, a little bit more. The guidance and methodology that was used to calculate this was based in part on the Iowa Economic Impact study that was done some years ago, as well as a couple of FAA documents recently published for 2021 and in 2020 on how to conduct a benefit cost analysis and the values utilized. So let's scroll back down to the table. So I just didn't pick the methodology or numbers out of the air. I did make reference to these other documents that basically are used nationwide to calculate benefits. So the transportation benefit then of the airport in 2021 was computed at 132,000. I would anticipate that to increase over the 20-year time horizon up to about 220,000. So if you go on to the scroll down a bit more now, then I also calculated a benefit of basically visitor expenditures as a result of about 30-some% of those itinerant operations by outside persons. So that pre-pandemic total was approximately 131,000 that would be spent locally, and then obviously took a dip in 2020, but will ultimately go back up to 145,000. So what I will do then with these numbers is I'll run a cumulative total over a 20-year period of time, and then total them all up, and then we'll discount them at 7%, which is the guidance and recommendation of the Office of Management and Budget, and it's also the same methodology that we use when we're submitting benefit costs to FAA for improvement, which are basically used to then base investment decisions. So what I hope to do with this then, and as you can imagine, if you just took the, let's say, 131,000 that's listed there and multiplied that out by 20 over a 20-year period of time, it's going to be well over a couple million. We'll discount that by year over that 20-year period of time. We'll get a total. Then what I would hope to use and present then to the city council is a cumulative number of and total benefits that this airport generates to the city of Marion and the community. And then ultimately use that then and compare it to other capital investment costs, discounted in the same manner, which I haven't calculated yet, but it will help then guide in investment decisions on benefits extended when the city makes an investment in the airport. So I just kind of wanted to run through that a little bit to give this committee some idea of what we're involved in addition to several other tasks that we've been assigned. So moving on then, and to that we'll add direct benefits. There is obviously employment generated. You want to scroll down to the next table. Taking total employment by Lux Air, PNN, the two tenants, major tenants on the airport, and we'll have a dollar value associated with direct jobs that are supported at the airport as well, along with other benefit cost factors. So with that, then we can move on to minimum standards. And I think one of the discussions as we develop these minimum standards, this is actually the second part of this effort, or another part of it, which ultimately be appended into a set of recommendations. We'll start with definitions and define what the FBO is and what the FBO's obligations are with regards to a public-owned airport as a standard then against which to evaluate the existing FBO agreement and use as a tool in developing addendums or modifications to future agreements. And so there are some basic services that really need to be provided. So, and then we'll also develop a section for specialized aviation service providers, which would a typical specialized service provider would be PNN, for an example, with Lux Air, obviously being the FBO, the fixed base operator. And so we'll set forth some standards there with regards to delivery of service and other requirements. We'll develop a section for hangars that in the future that a site plan will be prepared, submitted to the city in reference to the city's building codes, and other site plan approval processes would be employed just to make sure that when a hangar is constructed, whether by the public sector or private sector, it's consistent with the airport layout plan and terminal area plan. So that's some of the things, I guess, as for this meeting, is the quick overview of some of the assignments that we've been given to work on as part of our agreement with the city itself. So any comments regarding, I think, the forecast? I think they're conservative, which I think we like conservative because we base decisions on that, and if it exceed expectations, that's great. And then secondly, on the benefit cost methodology, because I think one of our obligations to the city council is to try to quantify the value of the airport, of the benefits of the airport. And since investments have already been made in the airport in the terms of not only land, but the runway and other improvements to date, as well as those anticipated in the near term, including the access that you discussed earlier this evening. The improvements that are made beyond those, I think we can clearly demonstrate that they're justified based on the benefits that, again, accrue to the community over the life of the investment. Most of our investments will use FAA guidance on determining investment. For an example, runways generally have a 20-year life cycle, as does lighting and some other items. And so if we have a established $3 or $4 million investment scenario, then we can look at that over time and justify other investments locally by the owner, which would be the city itself. And those obviously would be in part paid for with assistance from Iowa DOT as well. So that's kind of the logic and rationale and method I'm using to, I think, come up with what is the value of this airport to the community, try to quantify it, and then recognize the contributions that everyone's been making to make this airport whole. It is a nice airport. It's well made. The grass is mowed and looks good. Buildings going up. Somebody's doing a good job. So.
Hey, Jerry, I have a question on the forecast. So
Sure.
with an airport of our similar size, how do we stack up in comparison to somebody that's like us? As far as aircraft operations and what you see is in the coming future.
Well, I think part of the success story of the airport has been obviously built around instruction, flight instruction. And so much of your activity, as you know, it is driven by those types of airplanes that are used for flight instruction. As was mentioned today, you mentioned the King Air that came in. Part of this calculation on visitor expenditures by that 1/3 of the transient aircraft is an example of how that is recognized and accounted for in dollar terms. There's obviously going to be other expenditures for goods and services. So the question is, how do you stack up? Well, with 50 based, if you're at 50 based aircraft, you're doing really quite well, because you can look at the bigger GA airports in the state, which would be, we'll start with Davenport, around 100 based aircraft, and I'm just kind of remembering these off the top of my head, but then you've got an airport like Iowa City, which is a little different. Then you get to Ankeny, it will be around 100. Council Bluffs is a lot less for some strange reason in a big metro area. So if you get to 50, given the size of the metro and the growth of the airport, and given the relationship and proximity to the Eastern Iowa Airport, which technically is not all that far away, mile-wise or drive time, I think you're doing quite well. So when we talk about right-sizing the airport, it seems to me is to get you're working on the approaches right now. How long it takes to get a published approach, it'll take about, if you're lucky, you might get one in a couple of years. It takes forever. But
that was my second question, actually, is does your forecast take into account what our operations will look like with an approach?
Correct. Yeah, we assume that you would have, and I don't know how low the minimums will be yet, but I think it would be desirable if the approaches are clear. Technically you can get to 203/4, or certainly 250 and 3/4 mile. And that's without obviously an approach light system. Yeah. So you will pick up more of the approach category B aircraft. So those numbers would tend to increase while the approach category A operations will probably decrease. I would project an increase in A-2 because approach speed and wingspan with some of the new aircraft that are coming out. B1, B2, and then you'll start seeing increased numbers of approach category C aircraft. Those airplanes with an approach speed about 141 knots or less. But that approach category C is what's going to drive the runway, additional runway length. probably more so than the approach category B airplanes. So in the near term, it seems that where you're at now with the 23 based aircraft, the number one priority is to get that number back upwards to the 50 again. That stabilizes in the delivery of aeronautical services, because we have to make sure that the FBO and those people on the airport can sustain their business operation. And then the next priority, I think, would be the runways in place, would be a parallel taxiway. The approach is in place. I think you can see what you experience off the lower approach minimums. And parallel taxiway and aircraft parking, and then, the other smaller items like you'd mentioned before, the rotating beacons and so on and so forth. You will need AWAS if you're going to use any assistance for that. It's going to have to be on public ground. So we're going to have, and AWAS siting has certain criteria. And right now, you couldn't locate an AWAS because you don't own enough public ground. You got to have, the 500-foot radius, clear of buildings and all that sort of thing. So in your particular situation, with the amount of development you have adjacent to the airport, both the east and west, we have to be very careful that we can maintain that 500 to 1,000-foot radius around that's unobstructed, so it doesn't affect, the reporting from the AWAS facility itself. And obviously Jane knows all about that, because I think Jane's been looking into the AWAS. So, but yeah, I think you'll see your based aircraft numbers. And so within 5 years, I think you want to update these forecasts again. Because right now, we're basically dealing with existing conditions, which is 23 airplanes. This is what we got on the field. The question then is, how are we going to get those numbers up? And that, to me, is the focus, is the near-term focus. And I think, so when it's all said and done, how will you rank in the state of Iowa? Oh, you could, there aren't many airports that are going to get much above 50. I mean, there's probably, 15 that will fall into that category, maybe 20, something like that. You'll be in that group. So I guess you could say in the top 20 airports out of the 100 and some airports in the state.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, my opinion, for a town this size, the top 20 is excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things, the competition you have is different than other locations. But, the community growth direction, how the metro area grows, there's advantage to the one respect of having the older hangars is, you got cheaper hangar rent. I mean, there's, old doesn't necessarily mean bad, it might help you reach your objective. So, I think what we want to do, the idea here is this is supposed to be a public airport. And so I think one of the priorities is we have to have some public owned ground, because we can't use these funds without having that under public ownership. So, and to do it efficiently. So I think that's some of the things we're going to be looking at as well. With regards to standards is, and I've spent a lot of time on Through the Fence, just different things, and trying to also make it consistent with FAA assurances. federal assurances, because if you ever have any hope of securing funding, then, you know, we will want to see the airport develop along those lines. So that's probably enough for me, isn't it, Tom? I talk too much.
Well, I think it illustrates and that there's a lot of work going on in the background. Jerry and I talked quite a bit, trying to solidify some of this information and numbers, and hopefully this helps, you know, to let people know what the airport offers and establishes some baselines for it as well. And as we evaluate, you know, the next item on the agenda, land donation and proposal from Lux Air, it provides the data that I think that really helps drive decisions, right? So.
I have one question, and I don't know if this is the correct place to ask it or not, but within the minimum operating standards, does that Jerry, does that involve safety at all with regard to certain safety measures or standards that are met or have to be adhered to?
Well, yes, it does with, I guess one way to point would be having fire extinguishers on the ramp and things of that nature. I guess is one example of safety from a more of an operational point of view, and other safety related from more of a design point of view would be taxi lane object free areas, making certain that they're clear, wingtip separation, those kinds of things from an aircraft movement area, and building codes, which the city already has in place. So these are things that should be incorporated and used. The city already has in place tools to enhance safety on the airport. And so we need to incorporate those into land leases or any other agreements that are entered into.
I have one specific question, I guess, with regard to safety. Maybe it's already in place, but knowing that we do a lot of work, I do personally out at the Eastern Iowa around it, doing warehouses and whatnot. Their policies with regard to cranes is very strict, and we jump through a lot of hoops. And I've been noticing more and more cranes right across 151 at that new development. And a lot of those cranes are in excess of 200 feet. And knowing that we're going to have more development right next to the runway, I don't know, is that part of any sort of operating standard, or what do we have in place already with regard to that?
Well, that should really, I think, when you adopted your zoning ordinance, I believe you have a tall structure zoning ordinance in place. There should be a provision in that ordinance that requires the proponent to obtain a 7460 or submit a 7460 to FAA for an airspace determination. So that is very common at virtually every airport in the state, included in virtually every airport zoning ordinance, even those going back many, many years, which typically referred to as tall structures ordinances, whereby anyone proposing, certainly submitting a site plan to me, a good time to do that is at the time a site plan is submitted and somebody's looking to get a permit or approval, you know, that one of the conditions on the checklist should be, if you're proposing that, is do you need a 74, do you need to check for airspace clearance? And from a city liability point of view, regardless of what someone's opinion is, I always tell the city or airport sponsor to require the proponent to submit a 7460. And then FAA will make a determination of whether that's a hazard to air navigation. And that'll be based on your the airport traffic patterns. It'll be based in part on Part 77, FAR Part 77, Airport Imaginary Surfaces, which you have done as part of your airport layout plan. So that's the best way to minimize liability and ensure that when a crane goes up, there's conditions set as to how it's marked, how long it can be up, issuance of NOTAMs, when that crane has to be taken down at night, and so on and so forth. Marked and lit, and especially the issuance of NOTAMs, but that burden falls in on the developer, and also gives the city and the building inspector, who's ever, a tool then also of enforcement. So that's a pretty common thing that's done all the time. There's cranes all over the place, and so
that's a good point. I guess, Bob, as you say that, I'm just thinking through the 2 new buildings that are going up on that site. I'll get with Medco and determine, how they plan to build those and construct them. And obviously we run them through our process for review during building review, but if they're going to have construction going on, we'll probably want to run that through that process. Because they would be in the transition zone. And I would assume, Jerry, that you don't necessarily do that within the horizontal surface, but primarily in the transition approach. And
well, generally, if it's close to the airport, I don't really care what surface it's in. I'm more concerned about the liability to the city.
Yeah.
So I said, fill the form out and submit it. You might complain about it, but do it anyway. So, because but you're right, because in the horizontal, you're 150 feet above the established airport elevation. So more than likely, it's not going to be an issue, but certainly in the transitional or anything close to the approach surface, in your case, yeah, I would, especially under the approach and transitional surfaces. Horizontal, yeah, maybe use judgment, but
Yeah.
Anybody got anything else for Jerry, or move on?
Yeah, Tim, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, Jerry, first off, thanks for that discussion on the 7460 submittal. That's new to me, and I'm glad that I think, Bob, you were the stimuli for that question, so thanks, I appreciate that. Going back to your estimates or projections, is there any kind of factoring in of ongoing promotion or marketing of an airport that is beneficial to what you ultimately might be able to forecast?
Well, I think most airport sponsors, owners, public-owned airports, things that they do from a public's point of view may be to have a courtesy vehicle and advertise that and things of that nature to make it easier for transient users and people conducting business or pilots to get around. But I think when it comes to the other components, then I would anticipate the FBO would make that effort to promote the airport. If they own and operate and derive income from the hangars, anything that they would derive income from, it would seem to me that that burden would, and would fall on the FBO or specialized service provider to promote their business. They're promoting their business. From the city's point of view, promoting the airport, I think then you have organizations like Medco and others that, should be promoting the airport from their standpoint of business development, attracting aircraft to the airport itself. So
Well,
I don't think I answered your question, but that's kind of how it works.
no, I guess, your analysis will need to stand on its own accord based on the fundamental inputs that you're required to make in that consideration. I guess I'm just, for the committee's general knowledge, I know that my city council colleagues, and I think Randy will share the same opinion, they're gonna, it's just gonna be cost benefit analysis for them. And it's gonna be incumbent on Randy and I certainly to try to shape their favorability on anything that we want to do long term. And so obviously this economic analysis that Jerry is working on is an input to our ability to shape their opinions, and which then ultimately means agreeing with actions that we all want to take. And that also is coupled by, I think, fundamental recommendations that will come out of this group. But at the foundation of everything, I think where we're at is we should start thinking, and I think we need to join with Lux Air on that. We need to join with PNN. We need to, even ourselves think, how are we going to market the airport? And how, what's our marketing profile in the short term? And then as conditions change on the ground and as we build amenities out and all that kind of stuff, we alter that marketing plan. And so I just have an interest in that, because I believe that where we're sitting today is we've got a rough cut gem, and we need to figure out ways to bring interest in, bring occupancy up, and just really try to create a foundation where basically it's a compelling environment that allows us to continue to develop it out for a certain category of inbound and outbound aircraft. So I don't know what I'm saying there, other than I'm kind of energized about it. And of course, I've got a can of pop in me, and so that caffeine helps.
So your idea, Grant, is you're thinking of a promotion of campaign that extends outside the metro area, where we advertise, I guess a lot of, got cheaper fuel, things of that nature, that get that information out.
Yeah, I'm certainly not a marketing person, but I just think we have an opportunity to put a little bit of thinking onto this and define some form of a plan that is smart, or to use your phrase, right-sized for the time. And the benefit is the objective is in the short term, and the longer term is ultimately we drive interest and therefore traffic in and out of the airport, and as well as perhaps permanent occupancy with aircraft being housed there. So anyway, I haven't thought more about it, other than every time I think about what to do to drive interest, I think about some kind of a marketing plan. And okay, Mr. Chairman, I am going to stop talking because I have now completely eclipsed my boundary of idiocy. So I will now be quiet.
Well, can I just comment on that comment? And that is, you have two service providers. The purpose of an airport is to provide and deliver aeronautical services. So that's what attract airplanes. That's why aircraft are based there. That's why they come there to get maintenance, to get fuel, to do business with the business community. And so I think Grant, and to use their tools, which they have websites and they're out always promoting as well, I think is to get a comprehensive marketing plan put together, incorporating the aeronautical services that they provide, and that are going to certainly attract people to the Marion Airport. I think I may be off base there, but that's how I kind of think what you're getting at. And then added to that then is also the economic development part, which is non-aeronautical, and that is and relates to the adjacent business parks. So that I think, to me, that's what you're marketing and selling. But I think you have two businesses on the airport right now that provide these services, and to continually enhance the delivery of those services is what attracts. I think a mechanic probably attract. Looking at all the smaller airports I work on, if there's probably one thing that drives airplanes away, and that's the FBO, and the one thing that attracts airplanes is the FBO. And having a really good mechanic is a big factor. So I think an A&P is worth their weight in gold on an airport. Doesn't get any credit or recognition, but certainly brings airplanes in.
I can tell you my experiences. It seems to me that there's two things that drive more people to the airport that I've noticed, and it's businesses around the airport, whether it be an avionics shop or an A&P, like you said, Jerry, or the FBO, or the city. Some of these cities that have these airports, they incorporate all of their festivals or other groups together with the airport. They always manage to incorporate them. So I think the city could help out a little bit with that if we have anything that's up and coming. But I think you're right, though. The businesses around the airport will help drive that. So hopefully in time, that'll take root. Anybody else have any other comments before we move on?
I just think that the two operators are there should share in some of that burden, but also with Medco and the chamber, I think it could be a collaborative effort. There should be a lot of people promoting the airport, and a lot of them should be able to come together and with that common goal.
I mean, just using Pella as an example, I mean, in a Tulip Festival, they incorporated the airport with what they had going on. They do it every year. So, I mean, and there's lots of instances like that, where they'd have something where, there'd be some sort of festival or community event that they'd always incorporate the airport. So I think any little bit of that helps. Just get feet to the airport. So
one of the differences is that we own a really long strip of concrete. That's what the city has. And to the extent that we can promote the quality of our long strip of concrete is what the city does. You've got businesses that are operating there that have a responsibility is not exactly the right word, but they have an interest in bringing additional customers into their businesses. They're the ones with the highest motivation to get something done. And that's where that responsibility lies in terms of promoting the airport. We managed to get somebody to rent our long strip of concrete, and that was the promotion that we do as a city, and it was successful. And that we've done what we need to do to sell our part of the airport. Now, if you want to talk about the city becoming the owner of the airport and then taking the responsibility for promoting it, that's a different discussion. But until then, it's up to PNN and Lux Air and whoever else is at the airport to do the promoting.
I'm
I
not
think
entirely sure that that framing is particularly helpful. I mean, even at other airports where it is city owned, I mean, they're still having another entity come in and run the FBO. And so I don't know if you want to just look at it as, you know, the only responsibility is about, you know, the strip of concrete, as you were saying. I mean, it should just be a collaborative effort, because it is the airport as a whole. If you just look at a portion of it as only that's the only interest the city has, that's not going to be conducive to the airport as a whole growing, which is still the interest of everybody involved.
And I agree. And so I should point out that I am stating things the way that I'm stating them in order to show the sheer insanity of the city owning a piece of concrete and pretending like they own an airport. And that's all. So I agree with you. I think it's in everybody's interest for the airport to be successful. The city ought to own it. They should have bought it in the beginning, and then they can do all of the exciting promoting stuff that they want to do. But they don't even want to zone for a second runway, and the city has not exhibited any interest in promoting this airport beyond paving it and painting lines on it.
Yeah, well, Craig, I guess my thinking is a little bit along Steve's. We can't, I would just want to say, you know, we can't change how arrangements were made in the past. My mind generally is to think about how we can optimize our existing condition in the framework that we have. And then also through the work in terms of future planning, which is some of the output that Jerry's doing for us, it gives us some different perspectives on what we might in fact change over time in order to optimize funding opportunities and all other matters of influence on the airfield. I would just say though, yeah, I think right now in my mind's eye, the airport is a community asset. It has several different partners in the interest of its performance. That includes Chamber, Lux Air, PNN, the city, and obviously Medco. And so I think my concern is we do need to put a little bit of unified energy and try to promote an interest in the airport. And that will then help propel other decisions downstream that may ultimately lead us to a different configuration in terms of the business relationship around the airport. But none of that is possible unless we generate some excitement and interest around that from multiple angles. So I appreciate what you're saying. I'm really just sitting here thinking about what's our path for making it better over time. So back to you, Craig.
Well, that's no different than saying that I-380 only as a strip of concrete that only helps, you know, the city and the drivers. There's plenty of businesses on I-380 that benefit from that strip of concrete. And that's the same way I feel about the airport. The ultimate goal is that we get more businesses in town to benefit from, like Craig said, that strip of concrete. And what do we need to do to achieve that goal? Right?
Sure.
We all work
Maybe
together.
we should put it on the agenda for some time to discuss. It's not on the agenda for tonight.
All right, let's move on. Land donation update.
Yes, so along with a lot of the information that Jerry's been preparing, and I think the conversations about how to respond are driving Jerry to maybe work a lot harder trying to get the impact analysis completed and some of the minimum standards in order to respond to the proposed land donation. As the committee is aware, we did order the appraisal. We've received the appraisal. I have shared that with the city council. We shared that in a closed session. And obviously, I think one of the questions is okay, before we respond to anything, we really need to understand the benefit analysis associated with the airport. So what I would say about the proposal or the proposal that we've received and how to respond, I think it's going to be essential that we have a discussion in closed session with the city attorney present to discuss the proposal and to review it and take a peek at or take a shot at providing a recommendation to the city council as it relates to a response. And I think that's something that, you know, we're going to need to kind of have a conversation about. And I think we'll need to do that at the next meeting. And I think we need to plan to have a closed session for that conversation. Jerry and I spoke a little bit today. We should have a pretty good grasp of that economic impact analysis fully vetted, hopefully by the next meeting. And so we would work towards going into closed session, talking about those things, and then be able to provide some recommendations to the full council. So that's where I think we're at on the donation. And I don't know if anybody has any questions, but not much other than that has changed.
Question on who would do the closed session? How does that work?
We would have the city attorney bring us to closed session, then anything that's discussed, it's all recorded, it's done consistent with open meetings law. And I would definitely want the city attorney there to kind of guide us through that and talk about what it means to be in closed session. Obviously, Grant and Randy have had their fair share of closed sessions over the years, and so have I. But obviously, there's a lot to that conversation, so we want to make sure that we're prepared to talk. And there's just not a real point to move into that until we have a full analysis of the impact analysis.
Hey, Tom?
Yep.
Tom, can you, how does closed session work with Zoom? Can you do it? Does that work?
That was my next question. Meet in person.
It does. And I will have to talk with Alicia on how we did it at the city council, because we've done it on city council meetings. Yeah, we'll figure that out. I think one question I would have is where we'll be in a month from now. So, you know, the numbers for COVID certainly aren't going down. So we'll have to figure that out. But yes, we can go into closed session on Zoom.
Okay. All right.
I didn't have anything else on the land donation. I did just want to provide one update. Mike didn't mention, but I think maybe he didn't mention because he knows more than I do. But the parts are in for the lighting, and that I think we were trying to schedule the repair, Steve, just so you know. So hopefully that'll get accomplished here soon. The runway lighting. And well, it's getting late here, but I just wanted to let everybody know I've heard a few comments about the signage, and we talked about it about a year ago or so. And honestly, I hadn't been out in a while, but every time I drive down Airport Road, I'm reminded that does not look city-esque by any stretch of the imagination. And so that sign may actually just disappear, and we will figure out a new sign, because I don't think that sign in its current state adds value. nor needs to be there because everybody knows where the airport is, or when they're driving down that road, I don't think that sign helps guide them to anything other than it just does not provide any benefit to the airport. So, any problem with that?
Not if it disappears, no.
All right. So, if you see a gray pickup truck, with a chainsaw in the back, in the dark of the night, it's Barkalow. All right, well, we're gonna work on that inside sidebar. I know we talked about it some time ago and it just kind of fell flat, we had other things going.
I had one
Anyway,
quick
any other-
question. I had one quick
Yeah.
question before we adjourn. It's not on the agenda, but that I saw what are you calling the East End Development Plan? That was
Yeah.
at the Water Board meeting, and then I guess P&Z was approving it. That we had members on that committee, correct?
We really didn't have a big committee, but Jerry has been involved in that. And I can present that to the committee at the next meeting. We did provide a reflection of the airport approach zone. It's
Yes.
green space north of the highway. I probably should have had that on for discussion, but I'll bring that forward to the next meeting.
Yes, I saw that last night, and it's definitely, there's an impact from 1.7. Yeah, I thought maybe it'd be on the agenda tonight, but yeah, the committee ought to see that.
So we had an open house before Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did recommend approval. We aren't pushing it forward to the City Council right away. We want to provide some opportunity for folks that live out in that area to provide some feedback, and then I'll bring it back to the committee here as well. And
I think somebody asked the question earlier, and I'm sorry, I forget who it was, but somebody asked the question of you, Tom. Did that development impact both the current or future operations for the airport? And I believe you said that it did not. So I'm assuming that was vetted during that decision or that approval process.
so there are two different things. This is a long-range plan for north of 151. So it's all land use. The Aircom Park is a preliminary plat for just east of the airport, and so that ground's already zoned, and it's just a preliminary plat. I believe the plat is consistent with. There's minor modifications, but it's almost identical to how the ALP laid that property out. The lots just got a little bit smaller. So.
Okay, sorry, I confused the two. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. No, believe me, there's a lot going on. In retrospect, we probably should have had the presentation of that plan on this agenda, and so we'll make sure that gets in front of this group before it gets down the road to City Council.
Yeah, what I saw definitely had green space, for the approach zones, and it looks like it did a good job. So I assume Jerry was in on that. So, but the committee ought to see it at for long range planning. Okay.
Yep.
Anybody have anything else? Okay, let's adjourn. Good
All
day.
right.
Adios.
Hey, John, you got a second?
Who?
Thanks all.
Yeah.
Take care, all.
We'll see you guys. Are you here?
Who do you need?
Bender.
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you in Marion?
Yeah.
Hey, I just while I had you, I just wanted to, man, I'm sorry to hear about Dooley.
Oh yeah, that was a pretty horrendous deal last Friday morning. So yes, our next door neighbor. Yeah, it was just there wasn't a lot they could do. Yeah. So and then I don't know if you've got all the details on.
Mm-mm.
visitation at tomorrow night
Oh.
at, no, Thursday night at Murdoch.
Murdoch.
Yeah,
Yep.
funeral Friday noon, and then up here at Hunter's Ridge, like a celebration of life. Everybody gets together Friday night. So
Okay.
everybody's welcome. He's had a lot of,
All
he
right.
had a lot of friends. So anyway, yeah, that was a rough couple days there.
Yeah. How's Kathy hanging in there as best she can? I
Yeah,
would
best you
imagine, but-
can. We've been over there and we cooked dinner for him all. All his kids are back.
Oh, good.
His kids, they were all back, and then he's got a lot of brothers and sisters. I mean, he's got like 8 brothers and sisters, so hopefully they can all get back by Friday. So yeah, I appreciate the comments. I'll pass it on.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Okay. Hey, Mike, Rachi's got a lot of work to do downtown. Is he going to be able to get this other thing done?
I don't know. I mean, even with 7th Avenue, they have like 2 crews up there working. So
Okay.
So-
I heard according to
they
the
were,
water.
they were half the price of the other 2. Boomerang and Pierce Tobin were double their price.
Okay. Well, at the water board guys were impressed with what they were doing uptown last night.
I wish they would have started a little sooner, but I mean, at least they have 2 crews up there working. So
Yeah, Andy and Kurt both said they were working with them, but they were doing a good job. So
Yep.
that's great.
I've
Last night
noticed
there were-
it's been a lot better since Tim Williams left.
I've worked with him. So anyway, I have worked with him. Yes. So,
Yeah. So it's gotten a little easier.
yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, good. I didn't want to bring that up saying, okay, hopefully they get her done. But,
Yeah.
if they're doing a good job. That's no problem.
Yeah, they hired this project manager, Adam Fab. He's a PE. He's from Chicago. So he's doing a pretty good job.
Okay. All right. Well, carry on.
Yep.
Yeah.
See you guys.
See ya. Thanks.